You pour a drink after a brutal day, and for 1 second, your shoulders finally drop. You assume that's just a modern habit, something humans invented along with punch cards and Fridays. But the real answer is far stranger. That craving didn't start with humans at all. It started with a monkey sniffing a rotten fig. Yes, a monkey, sniffing garbage fruit. And somehow that monkey is the reason your uncle gets weird at weddings. Here's how it actually happened. Long before humans existed, your ancestors were tree-dwelling primates who ate fruit for a living. Ripe fruit falls to the ground, sits there, and starts to ferment. Wild yeast breaks down its sugar and produces ethanol, the same chemical found in beer and wine today. So every rotting piece of fruit on a prehistoric forest floor was basically a tiny, unlicensed brewery. That smell wasn't gross to your ancestors. It was a dinner bell. A fermenting smell meant the fruit was ripe, sugary, and packed with calories. Primates who could sniff it out from a distance beat their slower-nosed cousins to the buffet. Biologist Robert Dudley calls this the drunken monkey hypothesis. His argument is that the attraction to alcohol wasn't a design flaw. It was a competitive advantage, wired straight into the primate brain to chase down easy calories before somebody else got there first. So somewhere in your DNA, there is a tiny primate elbowing other primates out of the way for old fruit. Charming. That wiring never left. It came down from the trees, moved into caves, and eventually learned to walk into a liquor store with a debit card. But sniffing rotten fruit is one thing. When did someone actually sit down and think, let's make this on purpose? For a long time, the guess was ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, the greatest hits of early civilization. Then the evidence showed up somewhere nobody was expecting, and it made the whole timeline look ridiculous. In 2004, a team led by archaeologist Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania studied pottery jars from a Neolithic village called Jiahu in China's Yellow River Valley. The jars were almost 9,000 years old. McGovern's team ran chemical analysis on the residue and found tartaric acid and other fermentation markers baked right into the clay. Inside those jars was a mixed fermented drink made from rice, honey, and fruit. Part rice wine, part mead, brewed as early as 7,000 BCE. Let that sink in. Before the pyramids, before the wheel, before a single word had ever been written down anywhere on the planet. Humans had already figured out how to write nothing, invent no math, discover no metal, and still somehow perfect a boozy rice cocktail. Priorities. But Jiahu wasn't humanity's first contact with alcohol. It was just the first proof someone made it on purpose instead of finding it by accident. Go back even further to a burial site called Raqefet Cave near modern-day Haifa, Israel. A group of hunter-gatherers called the Natufians used that cave roughly 13,000 years ago. Researchers from Stanford examined stone mortars found there and discovered residue consistent with beer brewing. Not wine, beer, brewed from wild grains, thousands of years before farming even existed. Read that again. Beer existed before bread did. For decades, the story of civilization went like this. Humans settled down, started farming grain, and beer showed up later as a happy accident of that farming. The Raqefet Cave discovery flips that story on its head. Some researchers now argue it may have gone the other way. The desire to brew alcohol might be one of the reasons humans started farming grain in the first place, not a bonus that came afterward. So picture the pitch meeting. 10,000 years before agriculture, someone stands up in a cave and says, "Forget hunting. Forget migrating. Let's stay in one spot and grow grain forever, purely so we can keep the beer supply going." And apparently, that pitch worked. What does that tell you about what actually mattered to early humans? It sounds ridiculous until you remember what alcohol does to a group of people. It lowers inhibition. It loosens social walls. It makes strangers feel like friends, fast. For small hunter-gatherer bands trying to build trust and form alliances to survive, that effect wasn't a party trick. It was social glue with a really strong buzz. This is where it gets personal. Your body still runs on the same hardware your ancestors evolved to break down fermenting fruit. Alcohol dehydrogenase, the enzyme your liver uses to process alcohol, shows genetic signs of adapting specifically to handle dietary ethanol tens of millions of years ago. Long before any hominid ever stood upright, and long before anyone had invented the concept of a hangover. Your liver isn't reacting to some sleek modern invention. It's running ancient software written for a forest floor that no longer exists on hardware that never got the memo. And the craving follows the same old logic. A dopamine response, the brain's built-in reward signal for anything tied to survival or bonding, fires the moment alcohol enters your system. Your ancestors weren't rewarded for walking past fermenting fruit like it was no big deal. They were rewarded for going straight for it. Here's the twist most people never connect. The exact instinct that made your ancestors excellent foragers is the same instinct that can spiral into a real problem today. It's not a coincidence that alcohol is one of the most widely used substances on Earth and one of the hardest to walk away from once it has a grip. You're not battling some flaw invented last century. You're battling a survival strategy that never got the update, running headfirst into a world with a liquor store on every corner, open late, with nothing standing between the urge and the bottle except you. So why does one drink at the end of a hard day feel like relief instead of just a liquid? Because somewhere in your biology, that fermented smell still means something. It still whispers that calories have arrived, that tension can finally ease, that the people around you might feel a little closer tonight. None of that logic was built for a world with refrigeration, 24-hour delivery, and a drink always within arm's reach. It was built for scarcity, for a time when fermenting fruit on a forest floor was rare and absolutely worth fighting a fellow monkey over. 9,000 years ago, someone in Jiahu bottled that ancient craving on purpose instead of leaving it to chance. 13,000 years ago, someone in a cave near Haifa was already brewing beer before anyone had planted a single seed of grain. And millions of years before either of them, a fruit-eating primate somewhere in a prehistoric forest sniffed out a rotting fig and decided that smell was worth chasing. That primate wasn't weak. It was efficient. It was doing exactly what evolution built it to do, badly dressed and slightly sticky. You do the same thing today. You just call it happy hour instead of foraging. So the next time you pour a drink after a brutal day, remember what's actually happening. This isn't some modern habit you picked up along the way. It's a signal passed down through millions of years of primates chasing ripe, rotting fruit through the trees, sharpened by hunter-gatherers who brewed beer before they ever planted a seed, and handed straight to you, sitting here right now, still answering the same ancient call. Your shoulders just don't know it's older than agriculture itself.